Hey guys, I don't usually review films because movie studios are dicks and will copyright claim your video for even using the tiniest amount of footage. But I've really wanted to talk about Don't Look Now for a while, since it's my favourite horror film of all time. It's a strange film to talk about because at first glance, Don't Look Now doesn't look like your everyday horror film. The film is set in the beautiful city of Venice, instead of being set in a haunted house or a spooky forest like a lot of horror films from that time were. Instead of being about avoiding a crazed psychopath, a lot of Don't Look Now revolves around the relationship between John Baxter, played by Donald Sutherland, and his wife Laura, played by Julie Christie. In fact, apart from maybe the last 5 minutes, this movie barely contains any elements of horror at all. When I first saw the trailer for this film, I figured the only reason people considered it a horror movie at all is because you have to stare at Donald Sutherland's hairy ass. But while Donald's ass is indeed present in the movie, and is deeply unsettling to look at, the real horror in Don't Look Now is far more sinister. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Don't Look Now's opening instantly sets the tone for the whole movie. John and his wife Laura are relaxing in their English home while their kids play outside. John is going through some slides. He notices one of a church where a strange figure is visible. This figure seems to be wearing a red coat, much like the one their daughter Christine is currently wearing. The colour red plays a prominent role in this film. Remember that for later. Christine is playing beside some water, which she then falls into and drowns, despite her father's best efforts to save her. John and Laura are both understandably stricken with grief after the death of their daughter, and so they decide to take a trip to Venice to try and forget all their problems. Everything seems to be going well initially in Venice. John is working on restoring a chapel, and Laura is enjoying the sights and sounds of the city. However, Laura soon meets two sisters, one of whom claims to be psychic. She tells Laura that she is able to sense her daughter and that she's okay. Laura is suddenly full of life again after hearing this great news. Later that night, Laura and John have sex, and this scene is where most of the controversy surrounding this movie initially came from. But to be honest, it really isn't that explicit, and it's a rather beautiful scene looking at it now. Despite all the hardships John and Laura have been through, it's clear that they both still really love each other, and this scene goes a long way towards demonstrating that. Afterwards, John and Laura go out to dinner, and this is where things start getting really strange. John sees what appears to be his daughter walking the streets of Venice. He can't make out the face, but the red coat and small height of the person instantly reminds him of her. Again, the colour red holds some importance here. Things get even stranger when the psychic woman informs Laura that her husband is in danger. Even though Laura tries to warn her husband that he needs to leave Venice, John is hearing none of it. Laura then receives the news that her son has been injured back in England, and so she has to return home. John has no interest in joining her, and stays in Venice. From this point forward, John ignores all signs that he may actually be in danger, which ultimately leads to his demise. John is actually given quite a few warnings that something is amiss. Firstly, he learns of a serial killer in the area. One of the victims is pulled from the water, which instantly reminds him of how his daughter died. Secondly, while working in the church, some of the building collapses and he is nearly killed. And finally, he begins to see weird visions. He sees his wife pass him on a boat with the two sisters, despite Laura telling John that she was returning to England. Despite all these visions and signs, John still refuses to return to England. That night, he sees the young girl in the red coat out walking the streets again at night, but this time he pursues her. He follows her to a building, and well, this happens.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm a friend. I won't hurt you. Come on.
Darlings.
Wait. Wait.
first saw this scene, I couldn't sleep for a week. It still makes my hair stand up on end whenever I watch it. Just everything about the scene is perfect. The dim lighting, which seems to only illuminate the woman in the corner and nothing else. I love John's reaction when he first enters the room. He's smiling, almost like he feels he's about to be reunited with his daughter once again, even though such a thing is impossible. And the look of horror on his face as he comes to the realization that the woman in the red coat is not his daughter. It's almost cruel in its execution. And this woman terrifies me. Something about the way she shakes her head as she walks towards John is so unsettling. But as terrifying as this scene is, it's also kind of hilarious. John actually let a 90-year-old midget walk up to him and cut his throat. I can't think of a more embarrassing death than that. He could have easily knocked her out if he wanted to, but I get that he was probably in shock. So why did John die? Well, simply put, he avoided all the signs that warned him of his death. Remember how I said the colour red is important in this film? Well, that's because almost every time red is shown in Don't Look Now, it's done to signify impending danger or death. Christine is wearing a red coat when she drowns. The slide John is inspecting features the woman in the red coat sitting in a church. The slide also turns blood red, almost to signify that blood will be shed by the woman in red in the church. And we all know the rest. One thing that always bothered me about Don't Look Now is that we find out literally nothing about the woman in red. I just thought it was a bit silly that there's conveniently a serial killer in Venice that also just happens to be a midget and wears a red coat like his daughter. But after reading a few fan theories, I've actually grown to really love this decision. One of the fan theories suggests that John's daughter drowning while wearing the colour red is a warning to John himself about his own impending demise. Another theory suggests that the woman in red is actually Lucifer or the devil, and is wearing a red coat to simply mock John and to lure him to his death. I love that theory. There is something about the woman in red that doesn't seem quite human. So why do I consider Don't Look Now the greatest horror film ever made? Because you simply don't see the horror coming. If you watched Don't Look Now without realising it's supposed to be a horror film, you'd probably think it's a film about a married couple trying to come to terms with the loss of their daughter, in any way they know how. And in a way, that is what the film is about. Laura learns to accept the loss of her daughter after talking to the sisters, but John never does. And it's that stubbornness, that inability to let go, that eventually cost him his life. As I previously mentioned, I love how this film is shot. You wouldn't think that Venice would be an ideal setting for a horror film, but director Nicholas Roeg makes it work. During the daytime, Venice feels alive and busy, but during the night it comes across as dark, lonely and ominous. I'm sure the real Venice isn't anywhere near as dark and frightening as this film portrays it as, but it still comes across as a place you wouldn't want to be walking alone in after everyone else has gone to sleep. I'm no expert in filmmaking. I don't know a huge amount about cinematography or anything like that, but multiple times while watching this film, I thought to myself, wow, this is a really pretty film. And while I'm not sure, I'm guessing thinking that means it has good cinematography. I just love everything about this film. The acting is exceptional, the setting is perfect, and while the horror is almost non-existent for most of the film, when it hits hard. The only problem with making a review of this film is that to show how much I love it, I needed to go deep into spoiler territory. But I still hope I've convinced at least some of you to watch it, because it's easily among the most terrifying films ever made.